What would you do if you found yourself in a haunted house? Do you believe in ghosts and the paranormal? Why or why not? My name is Jack, and this is the true story of what happened to my wife, Emily, and me during our honeymoon in Australia. This story is so terrifying that it still haunts us to this day. We were thrilled to explore a new country and start our new life together, but we had no idea what awaited us. We found a beautiful old house on a vacation rental website. The house was perfect, charming, secluded, and surrounded by stunning Australian wilderness. The owner assured us it was a popular rental spot, despite some odd rumors. He brushed them off as silly local folklore. We arrived at the house late in the evening. As soon as we stepped inside, we felt a chill in the air, even though it was summer. The house was old but well-maintained, with antique furniture and creaky wooden floors. There was something eerie about it, but we were too excited to pay much attention. Our first night was peaceful, but strange things began to happen the next day. Emily woke up with scratches on her arms. We thought it was just from the bushes outside, but we couldn't remember her going near any. As the day went on, we heard faint whispers and footsteps, but we were alone. The noises were easy to dismiss in daylight, but they grew louder and more persistent as night fell. That night, we heard a loud bang from the kitchen. I rushed down to check, but everything was in place. The next morning, we found all the chairs stacked on the table. Emily was terrified, but I tried to stay calm. I called the owner, who again dismissed our concerns, saying it was probably the wind or our imagination. We spoke to some locals who shared chilling stories about the house. Many renters had experienced strange occurrences. Some heard eerie voices, others saw ghostly figures, and a few were even injured. Most people left the house within days, too frightened to stay. Ignoring the warnings, we decided to stay. On the third night, things took a terrifying turn. Emily woke me up, trembling and pointing to the corner of the room. There, we saw a shadowy figure watching us. It was gone in a blink, but we were both paralyzed with fear. The following day, we tried to leave, but our car wouldn't start. We were trapped. That night, the terror escalated. Doors slammed shut, furniture moved on its own, and the whispers grew louder, almost as if they were trying to communicate with us. Emily was crying, and I felt helpless. We finally managed to leave the house the next morning, abandoning most of our belongings. We drove to the nearest town and stayed in a motel, too scared to return. I called the owner, demanding an explanation, but he simply said no one else had ever complained as much as we did. Back home, we tried to put the experience behind us, but the memories still haunt us. We later learned that the house was built on land where a family had been murdered in the early 1900s. The spirits of the victims were said to haunt the house, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to stay there. To this day, Emily and I avoid talking about our honeymoon. It was supposed to be the happiest time of our lives, but it turned into a nightmare we can never forget. This story is not just a tale, but a warning. Be careful where you choose to stay, and never ignore the signs of something sinister. In a small town nestled by a dense, ancient forest, there stood a house that everyone avoided. The townsfolk whispered about it, calling it the cursed house. No one had lived there for years, and the stories about it were enough to chill anyone to the bone. One dark, moonless night, a thief named Marcus decided to break into the house. Desperation drove him. He had heard rumors of hidden treasures left behind by the previous owners. Marcus was a seasoned burglar, but even he felt a shiver down his spine as he approached the decaying structure. As he stepped into the overgrown yard, the crickets abruptly stopped chirping, and the air turned icy. The front door creaked open with an eerie groan, as if it had been waiting for him. Marcus swallowed his fear and stepped inside. The interior was just as haunting as the exterior. Dust-covered furniture, cobwebs hanging like tattered curtains, and the overwhelming smell of decay. The house felt alive, like it was watching him. He shook off the feeling and started searching for valuables. As he rummaged through drawers and cabinets, he heard faint whispers echoing through the halls. Just the wind, he told himself, though his heart pounded in his chest. He found a few old coins and trinkets, but nothing worth the risk he was taking. Suddenly, he heard footsteps upstairs. They were slow, deliberate, and growing closer. Marcus froze. No one was supposed to be here. He held his breath, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. Silence. Marcus gathered his courage and crept up the staircase, each step creaking ominously. As he reached the landing, he saw a shadow dart into one of the rooms. His hands shook as he pushed open the door. The room was empty, but the air was thick with a sense of dread. The walls were covered in strange symbols, and an old, tattered diary lay open on a dusty desk. He picked it up and began to read. The entries told the story of a family who once lived there, plagued by mysterious and terrifying occurrences. The last entry spoke of a dark presence that had claimed the house as its own. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. He needed to leave, now. As he turned to flee, the door slammed shut. Panic surged through him. He pulled at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, surrounding him, mocking him. The room grew colder, and a dark figure appeared in the corner, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Marcus backed away, his mind racing. The figure moved closer, its presence suffocating. He could feel its hatred, its hunger. The thief fell to his knees, pleading for mercy, but the figure was relentless. In a final act of desperation, Marcus hurled himself at the window, shattering the glass and tumbling into the night. He ran, not daring to look back, until he reached the safety of the town. The townsfolk found him the next morning, rambling incoherently about the cursed house and the evil within. He never recovered from the terror of that night, and the house remained abandoned, its dark secrets untouched. The story of Marcus and the haunted house became a legend, a cautionary tale for those who might be tempted by greed. The house still stands, waiting for its next victim, a silent reminder that some places are better left alone. Have you ever wondered what lurks in the shadows of places we fear the most? What if you captured something on camera that shouldn't exist? Would you be brave enough to face it? This story is about three friends who dared to venture into a haunted forest in Japan to shoot a short film. Despite the locals' warnings, they were driven by curiosity and a desire to capture the supernatural on film. This true account, shared by one of the survivors, will leave you questioning what's real and what's beyond our understanding. In a small town in Japan, there's a forest shrouded in mystery and fear. The locals call it Yurei no Mori, which means the forest of ghosts. For generations, stories have been told about eerie apparitions, strange sounds, and people who entered but never returned. Three friends, Hiroshi, Kenji, and Aiko, decided to explore this forest for their film project. They were aspiring filmmakers with a passion for the paranormal. Despite the villagers' stern warnings, they were excited to uncover the secrets of Yurei no Mori. They thought the tales were just superstitions meant to scare off intruders. As they entered the forest, the dense canopy above seemed to swallow the light, casting an eerie twilight even in the middle of the day. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional rustling in the underbrush. Hiroshi, the leader, carried the main camera, while Kenji and Aiko documented their journey with handheld devices. They ventured deeper, setting up their equipment in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. It was there that they began to sense something was wrong. The air grew colder and an unnatural fog began to creep through the trees, wrapping around them like a shroud. As they started filming, strange things began to happen. The cameras picked up movements and shadows that weren't there, and they recorded voices whispering in languages they couldn't understand. At first they thought it was just their nerves playing tricks on them, but when Aiko's camera captured a figure standing in the fog, they knew they were not alone. Panic set in as the fog thickened, making it hard to see. They tried to retrace their steps, but the forest seemed to twist and turn, confusing their sense of direction. The more they tried to escape, the deeper they felt trapped. Hiroshi was the first to see it, a dark, shifting shape moving through the fog, coming closer and closer. He shouted for Kenji and Aiko to run, but his voice was swallowed by the dense air. The figure reached out with long, shadowy arms, and the three friends scattered in terror. They ran blindly, stumbling over roots and underbrush, their breaths ragged and hearts pounding. Hiroshi tripped and dropped his camera, the lens shattering as it hit the ground. He scrambled to his feet and continued running, not daring to look back. Kenji and Aiko managed to find a path leading out of the forest, but they were separated from Hiroshi. In their frantic escape, they dropped their equipment, leaving behind the very evidence they had come to capture. Finally, Kenji and Aiko burst out of the forest, collapsing onto the road, gasping for air. They looked back to see the fog receding, the forest returning to its eerie silence. There was no sign of Hiroshi. After what felt like hours, Hiroshi emerged, pale and shaken but unharmed. He had taken a different path and miraculously found his way out. The villagers found the friends and took them in, offering comfort and listening to their harrowing tale. They were warned not to go back, and their lost cameras were never recovered. Days later, the friends reviewed the footage they had managed to save on their handheld devices. What they saw chilled them to the bone. The recordings showed figures moving in the fog, voices whispering, and strange, unearthly sounds. But the most terrifying clip was of the dark figure reaching for Hiroshi. The shape seemed to shift and pulse, as if it were alive, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent light. The friends never returned to Yurei no Mori, and they warned others to stay away. The experience left them haunted, and they couldn't shake the feeling that something from the forest had followed them back. Have you ever heard a whisper in the dead of night, one that sends shivers down your spine? What if the stories we dismiss as urban legends are more than just tales? What if there's truth hidden in the shadows? Ravenwood was an ordinary small town by day, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, the air thickened with whispers of the past. It was said that once you entered Ravenwood after dark, you never returned the same. Some claimed the town was cursed. Others spoke of shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. What really happened in Ravenwood? No one could say for sure, but the legends were enough to keep most people away. One night, a group of friends, Liam, Ava, Noah, and Emma, decided to unravel the mystery of Ravenwood. They were thrill seekers, always on the hunt for the next big scare. This time, they bit off more than they could chew. As they crossed the town's boundary, an eerie silence fell. The wind stopped, and even the insects seemed to hold their breath. Their goal was simple: explore the old abandoned mansion on the hill, where the most terrifying stories originated. It was said that anyone who dared to enter after sunset would never be seen again. The group, equipped with flashlights and a sense of invincibility, pushed forward, ignoring the dread that crept into their minds. The mansion was a relic from another era, its grand facade crumbling, windows shattered, and ivy creeping up the walls like fingers reaching for the sky. As they approached, the temperature dropped, and a thick fog rolled in, cloaking the building in an otherworldly glow. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of decay. Their flashlights flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls. Every creak of the floorboards echoed through the silence, amplifying their unease. The group stuck close together, their nervous laughter masking their fear. In the grand hall, they found a large, ornate mirror covered in dust. As Emma wiped it clean, their reflection stared back at them, distorted and twisted. Suddenly, a shadow moved behind them. They spun around, but there was nothing there. The mirror, however, showed a figure standing just behind them, cloaked in darkness. Panic set in. Liam, always the skeptic, tried to rationalize it as a trick of the light, but deep down, he knew they had crossed a line. They decided to leave, but the mansion had other plans. Doors that once stood open slammed shut, trapping them inside. Their flashlights dimmed, and the air grew colder. Whispers filled the halls, indistinct but undeniably present. Noah suggested they head to the basement, hoping to find another way out. The stairs creaked under their weight, and the darkness seemed to swallow their light. The basement was worse than the rest of the house, a labyrinth of tunnels and forgotten rooms, each one more unsettling than the last. In one corner, they found a hidden door, barely visible in the dim light. Inside, they discovered a small room, walls lined with shelves of old books and jars filled with strange, unidentifiable objects. A large, circular symbol was carved into the floor, pulsing with a faint blue light. As they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them. Panic turned to terror as the room began to close in. The shelves toppled and the floor seemed to shift beneath their feet. Ava screamed, pointing at the symbol. It was glowing brighter, and from it, shadows began to emerge, swirling and taking shape. A figure formed in the center of the room, a being made of shadows and light, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly blue. It spoke without words, its presence filling their minds with a voice that was neither male nor female, but something far beyond human understanding. "You have awakened me," it said. "For centuries, I have waited, bound to this place by those who feared me. Now you must pay the price for disturbing my slumber." The group tried to plead, to reason, but their words were swallowed by the entity's overwhelming presence. It reached out, and as its hand touched each of them, they felt their minds being pulled into darkness. In a last desperate effort, Liam remembered the mirror in the hall. He had read somewhere that mirrors could trap spirits. With every ounce of strength he had left, he broke free from the entity's grasp and ran back upstairs. The others followed, fear propelling them forward. They reached the hall, but the mirror was no longer there. Instead, a portal of swirling light had taken its place. The entity pursued them, its rage palpable. With no other choice, they leaped into the portal, hoping it would lead them to safety. They emerged back at the edge of Ravenwood, the mansion now a distant memory. But something was different. The town seemed alive with an energy they hadn't noticed before. They had survived, but at what cost? As they caught their breath, they realized they had brought something back with them. The shadows that once haunted the mansion now lingered around them, whispering secrets of the past and future. They had become part of the legend, bound to the town in ways they couldn't yet understand. The friends never spoke of that night again, but they knew they could never leave Ravenwood. The shadows followed them, a constant reminder of the price they had paid for their curiosity. The town had claimed them, just as it had claimed so many others. And as the years passed, new stories began to circulate. Stories of a group of friends who entered Ravenwood and never returned the same. Stories of shadows that whispered secrets, and a mansion that held the key to an ancient, terrible power. Do you believe in ghosts? What if you had to face one alone, on a deserted road, in the dead of night? This is a true story of a truck driver whose name was Jack. Jack was a seasoned truck driver. He had driven across the country, through bustling cities and quiet towns, but nothing ever unnerved him. That is, until one fateful night when he took a job that led him to the infamous Miller's Hollow Road. The road was notorious among truckers. They said it was cursed, that strange things happened there. But Jack, being a practical man, didn't believe in such tales. He laughed off the warnings and set out on his journey, his truck loaded with goods and his route mapped out. The night was dark, and a heavy fog settled over the road as Jack drove deeper into the woods. The tall trees closed in around him, their branches stretching out like skeletal fingers. His headlights struggled to cut through the dense mist, and the road ahead seemed to vanish into the darkness. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Jack kept driving, his eyes fixed on the road. The radio played softly in the background, offering a comforting distraction from the oppressive silence outside. But as he approached the curve where Miller's Hollow Road began, the radio cut to static, and Jack was left with only the sound of his own breathing and the hum of the engine. Suddenly, out of the fog, a figure appeared on the side of the road. Jack's heart skipped a beat as he saw a woman standing there, drenched from head to toe in the rain. Her long, dark hair hung limply over her face, and she wore a simple white dress that clung to her like a shroud. Jack slowed down, unsure of what he was seeing. "Are you okay?" he called out, leaning out of the window. The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at him with eyes that seemed to bore into his soul. Feeling a chill creep down his spine, Jack decided to pull over. He stepped out into the rain, his boots sinking into the muddy ground. "Do you need help?" he asked, approaching her cautiously. But before he could get any closer, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the echo of her presence. Jack's blood ran cold. He quickly got back into his truck, his heart pounding in his chest. He had heard of ghost sightings on Miller's Hollow Road, but he had never believed them. Now, he wasn't so sure. Determined to get through this stretch as quickly as possible, Jack resumed his drive. The road seemed to stretch on forever, the fog growing thicker with each passing mile. Then, just as he thought he was clear, the figure appeared again, this time directly in the middle of the road. Jack slammed on the brakes, his truck skidding to a stop just inches from her. The woman looked up, her face now visible in the glow of the headlights. Her eyes were hollow, filled with a sadness that seemed to transcend time. She pointed towards a path leading off the main road, a path shrouded in darkness and mist. Jack's instincts told him to drive away, to leave this place as quickly as he could. But something about her gaze compelled him to follow. He turned his truck onto the narrow path, the tires crunching on the gravel as he navigated the winding trail. The path led him to an old, rickety bridge that spanned a deep black river. Jack stopped at the edge, the truck's engine idling. The woman appeared once more, standing on the bridge, her figure blurred by the rain. Jack got out of the truck and approached her. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. The woman pointed to a spot near the edge of the bridge, and as Jack followed her gesture, he saw something that made his heart stop. A small, forgotten grave marked by a simple, weathered cross. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This was where she had died. Jack knelt by the grave, feeling a wave of sorrow wash over him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of the rain. The woman's figure began to fade, her eyes softening as she looked at him one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice a faint echo on the wind. And then she was gone, leaving Jack alone on the bridge with only the sound of the river below. Jack stood there for a long moment, the weight of what he had witnessed settling over him. He knew he had to tell someone about this place, to make sure the woman's story wasn't forgotten. He made a silent promise to return, to bring flowers and remember the life that had been lost here. As Jack drove away from Miller's Hollow Road, the fog began to lift, and the rain eased into a gentle drizzle. The haunting feeling that had gripped him loosened its hold, and Jack felt a sense of peace he couldn't quite explain. When he finally reached his destination, he knew his life had changed forever. The ghostly encounter on that dark road had left a mark on him, one that he would carry with him always. Thank you for joining me on this eerie journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of the supernatural. Drive safely and always be cautious of the roads less traveled. Subscribe for more haunting stories.